Alright, let's get ourselves going here. Hello there, I'm EnviroBoy, this is my channel. I think I'm finally set up, had to get a couple extra things going and taken care of here. So sorry about that bit of delay at the beginning there, but welcome. If you're out there, or if you're watching on YouTube the bot afterwards, welcome. I don't know, is it like considered like poor form to sit here and acknowledge that this will be eventually on YouTube? I don't know. I don't know if there is etiquette about that, or if there is, what it is. Beats me. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? But at any rate, happy Friday to anyone out there. It is a nice sunny Friday for us around here, which is kind of nice. We don't get many sunny days this time of year, and well, Friday only comes once a week, so the fact that we got both on the same day is kind of neat. But it's putting me in a pretty good mood, which is making me feel good about doing a little bit of writing here. So, yeah, hopefully everyone else out there is having a good day as well. One can only hope, fingers crossed, right? But thank you for joining me here today. And, honestly, with that, I don't know that I really feel the need to sit here and do much more of an intro with that. I already took forever, so let's just get ourselves over into our scene here. So here we are. Today we are going to do a little bit of work on our campaign, as we do. It'll be a good way to just kind of finish off the week, cap it off a little bit, work on some new stuff. It's actually kind of fun. We're gonna start ourselves on the next part of this chapter of our campaign here, which is exciting for me. We're well past halfway done with this particular portion of our campaign, which is exciting for me and fun, because I kind of mentioned it before. I've been feeling a lot of inspiration. I've been listening to where it comes from. I've been listening to a podcast that's an actual play podcast of a Call of Cthulhu game, and it's been really inspiring to me because it's been, in a lot of ways, bringing me back to my tabletop RPG roots. The first tabletop RPG that I ever played was actually Call of Cthulhu. It was in college, and a friend who lived in my hall, who was a fairly goth type of individual. She was really cool, but she really wanted to try playing this game, and I had never played a tabletop RPG. I was vaguely familiar with the concept of Dungeons and Dragons, and I thought, like, hey, that sounds like a fun thing for us to do every now and then. And so she started a game, and we played, and it was my first experience with tabletops, and I had so much fun playing that game. And it was kind of, if I'm remembering my timelines of my own life properly, that was kind of my first introduction to like H.P. Lovecraft and like the Lovecraftian horror type of stuff. And I kind of fell in love. I love the Lovecraftian brand of horror, and just the nature of it being always this atmosphere of excuse me, of like the horror stems from the concept that whatever horror you're facing, it's not just that it's scary. It's not an attainable human thing, right? Like most horror is based around a human concept, right? A ghost of a human, a zombie, which is an undead human. And even when you go aliens, it's kind of, most of the time it's like a human but a little different shape, right? But they're still largely human. I mean, think about most of the sci-fi stuff and most of the way aliens are designed. It's a human in a rubber mask, right? So it's like, so most horror is a very human thing. Slashers are just humans hurting other humans and stuff. But H.P. Lovecraft and that sort of Lovecraftian brand of things incorporates stuff that is intentionally not human. And to me, that just sort of adds to this nature of the horror, because it's not only are like the motivations and the events twisted and messed up, the reasoning behind them is completely incomprehensible, because there is nothing human about what you're facing within most of like the particularly well-known Lovecraftian stuff. So that type of stuff has always fascinated me, and that type of feeling, not necessarily in a horror sense, but sort of just this feeling that whatever you're facing is just so alien and so far removed from the human experience that you just can't really even understand it. You're just sort of piecing together little clues that offer a bit of a picture, but are just so far beyond what you feel like you should understand. And it's always so fascinating and inspiring to me. And so listening to that podcast and getting myself kind of reacquainted with all of that has been so inspiring to me, which is really giving me a lot of fun, fresh ideas for the sort of the next parts of where this campaign that we're working on can go, and how I can design and theme them, especially now that we're kind of reaching the later parts of it where our players will be higher levels, so we can start presenting them with larger, bigger, more insidious challenges. So all of that to say that I'm very excited to be moving forward with this campaign, which means I'm very excited that we're going to work on the campaign a little bit today and keep making progress through it all. So with all of that rambling in mind, I'm going to just do our quick overview again of what we're working on. For anyone this is the first exposure they've had to my world and my campaign, I'll just kind of give a quick brief outline, and then we'll dive into what we're working on today. So what we're doing is we're making a fully homebrew campaign that takes place in my homebrew world. This is the world of Zaoria. It's a post-apocalyptic fantasy world in that there was an event called the Unhinging, where the mortal planes and the ethereal planes were kind of all ripped apart and shredded and intermingled, resulting in a whole lot of chaos, a lot of magical radiation left over in the world, and all kinds of horrible, hideous monsters that pretty much have the run of the land. Humanoids have managed to survive in a handful of cities, about 10 of them, and over the past 2,000 years have been slowly starting to sort of carve their way back into the rest of the world, which is now known as the Wilds. They're trying to make their way back through, they're trying to reclaim it, trying to rebuild a life that is beyond the protected walls of those few steadfast cities. Steadfast cities? What's a city? Steadfast cities. And so there's this ongoing goal to try and reclaim a lot of the world at this point in time. Our campaign kind of hinges on that concept, and it takes place within this world, within this little hex here. We've got a lot of different landscapes to work with, which is what's making it fun. We have forest, we have mountain, and we have plains, and then we, just for flavor, threw in a little lake right there. And so this is where it takes place, and the basic premise of, or at least how the campaign starts, is our players are part of an effort, a crew that was sent from the city of Fossvik to travel south and sort of map out what could be a potential safe passage to go directly from Fossvik down to Mofafetting here. Those are two of the cities that until now have had to follow this sort of long winding trail or pathway or road to get from one another, which obviously significantly hampers any trading between those two, and it also really limits the options both have. So this effort to build a road here is really intended to start rebuilding more diverse trade options, which will only benefit every city, that is really impacted by all this. So our players are part of that effort, and we can bring up now, this is the region, so this is within the hex here. This is our more detailed map of it all. Our players start off here as part of that. And as the mission is proceeding, it is confronted by a dragon who, it turns out, holds dominion over these Goldwind Plains down here, which is kind of where they're carving through. Dragon isn't a super huge fan of people being all up in his territory, especially because this dragon has had a historic obsession with history, and so has learned that like the humanoid races, while they were in charge, tended to cause a lot of war and destruction. And so he's not a fan of those types of people showing up in his domain. So he comes down to warn them off. And the leader of this group, an NPC, will say, "Hey, look, we're just trying to build a trade route. Is there something we can do to you, or do for you, so that you will allow us to build this pathway that we're trying to build?" Dragon will kind of ponder it and say, "All right, well, I've been trying to get access to this Hall of Wisdom. Presumably, there's knowledge there that." Of all kinds of human history. So if you help me get into there so that I can learn more about you people and learn, what sort of dangers you might present and how we can work together to prevent those, then I will allow you to build your trade route. It's locked up with magic and keys, so if you need to find 4 keys to be able to get me in there. If you find those 4 keys, we'll consider it a trade, and you guys can build your little pathway here. So our players, accepting the call to action, will be the ones to go on and do this. In their quest, they will first find, let's see here, wrong thing. We need right here. They will find the first key up here in the mountains, among the different giant tribes, and then once they do that, what is happening here? I'm getting all kinds of confused with my buttons here. So they'll find that first key among the giants, head back, do some research, and then get wind that the second key is within the abandoned dwarven city of Kagdaral. They make their way down there, find that the city isn't quite so abandoned these days. It's kind of been taken over by all of the Duragar that sort of came to be during the unhinging. And after sort of navigating all of that stuff a little bit, they'll learn that the next likely place to look for this second key that they're after is going to be within the Dwarven Vaults, which are a little ways away from the city and underground there. And so they're making their way downtown. Now, it's such an old joke, and it's not even an original joke. I don't know why I say it every time. It's a compulsion. It's a compulsion. I have a problem. I admit it. But they're making their way to it's not even down. They're heading north. You would say making their way up there. Making their way up to the vaults so they can find that second key. And that's the part of the campaign we are working on right now. This particular part, it's a kind of a chapter, is sort of the way I've come to think about these the way I organize these things. So this is the level 5 chapter of the campaign for the players as they reach level 5 and they're trying to get there. And this is the 4th part of the whole thing. So, they're in the city and they need to make their way north to get to the vaults. And so to do that, they have to pass through first a part of the city that's been still abandoned even by the Duragar, just because their numbers are too few to control the whole city, so they leave some of it to the various monstrosities and horrors that exist under these mountains. So they make it through the city, and that's the first 2 parts of this chapter. And then the next 2 parts of this chapter are making it through the tunnels that have sort of been intentionally carved and designed by the dwarves back in their day, to confuse and turn around and trap and just generally stop anyone trying to get to the vaults from getting to them. Obviously, these are their vaults with all of their treasure and their wealth. They don't want interlopers getting there. So naturally, our players have to figure out how to navigate it. So we just finished up, last time we were working on the campaign, we just finished up this first part, and now we are going to work a little bit on this second part here. This part I'm kind of excited about because this part's going to kind of encompass a fake ending, one of them fake out endings that, we get like 7 of them in Dark Knight, and movies in general love to do fake endings where you think that the conclusion's coming, but then, it was a guy in a mask, or some sort of weird twist comes about. This time it's my turn to be the one making that, and I think it'll actually be good. Because what it will be is the end of their search for the key. By the end of this one, they will have found the key, presuming that they remember that's what they're after, and look around the vaults when they get there, and they'll find the key. But then the reason, the way it turns into a fake out is that they will have one more one more situation to handle, which is that the hold on one second here. Always more than one thing in my life to handle at a time. Such is life. But yeah, so they will find the key, but in the process, the final trap that will be here will be one in which the tunnels to get back are destroyed and they collapse, blocking off their return, which will then force them to go above ground and travel through a small forest that exists within the valleys of the mountains to be able to get back to where they came from. And that's the idea that we're working with here. That's going to be the ultimate the ultimate direction that this bit of the campaign heads. So we're going to start working on this last part of these tunnels. And so the first thing that we need to do, and I always have a lot of fun with this, is we need to, oops, and not mean to put a space there. I wanted us to stay down here. One thing that I like doing is just randomly assigning what types of dangers and rewards are going to exist in each of the 10 rooms that we have for this part of the dungeon. And the reason I like doing this is because I always assign it all randomly. Which I think is a really fun way to do it, because it kind of gives me the opportunity to turn my writing into a creative writing exercise, instead of leaving it just as me writing out random details and always having to map everything. I like establishing a little bit of randomness to it, so that way I don't kind of fall into the habit of just constantly doing my own habits over and over again. It helps keep things fresh for me as a writer, for my players as players, and so on and so forth. It's turned into always being a pretty good situation for me. So we are going to randomly assign all this stuff. Hello, Stray in UK. How's it going? Good to see you here. You're just in time to watch me roll dice, but like I only have one cam, so you're not gonna actually see the dice. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. But luckily it's inconsequential because we're just writing. So I'm not cheating in any game, thank goodness. Not right now. I mean, that I do that off camera when there's no proof, obviously. Alright, so we need to figure out what dangers and rewards exist in all of these rooms. One thing that actually I should do first, though, is figure out if any of these rooms have anything that needs to be one thing or another. And I think, let's see, I need to review. Let's see, our boss here is going to be the Kruthic Hive Lord, and I wanted this to kind of be in like a nice big open space, and I want to make sure the boss battle, and like what's kind of good about this too is that the boss battle is not inherently required within this dungeon, which is always one of my favorite things to do for a boss. Like because players will naturally, just because of like game theory and how game mechanics work and what players like to do, they will seek out that boss, assuming that the boss is really important. Once you give them some sort of clue that there is a boss present, they'll want to seek that out, thinking like, oh, the boss is going to guard where we need to go. And in this case, that's not going to be the case, because the where they need to eventually end up is going to be up here, getting to the doors that then lead to the treasure vaults that they're after. And so in theory, they could kind of sneak their way past the boss over here and just work their way through some side tunnels to get there. But I am willing to bet that my players won't do that, or any players won't do that, because players are oftentimes predictable, and especially in D&D, they are oftentimes murder hobos who will seek out anything that they can kill and kill it. So I do want room 4 to be our boss battle for this section. So I'm going to put a little note there and say boss battle. The reward doesn't necessarily need to be anything in particular for that. as ultimately the reward for this section. Oops, that's not where I wanted to go. I wanted to go over here. The reward for this section is kind of coming up here. So for this one, I almost feel like this would be a good one to do. Room 2 up here would be a good one to do for for like either a puzzle or a trap. Like there's one final obstacle that the dwarves would have put in front of the door, so that they can, get one final shot at stopping any robbers from getting in there. So our players will have one final hurdle to overcome anyway. So, oh, you like the way I've got my notebook organized? Yeah, it's the culmination of a lot of years of obsessively trying to find the system that makes it easiest for me to find all of the random nonsense that I've written for this world. And it's taken a lot of work to figure it out, and I pretty much settled the organization. I haven't really edited that in quite some time, and so nowadays most of my edits for all of my organizing and everything fall under setting up my templates that I use for like dungeons and for shops and for characters and all of the different aspects that I like to use when I'm fleshing out my world. So I find other ways to direct my obsession. But no, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a long time in the making, getting this OneNote like this, and I highly recommend OneNote. It's a little simplistic. There are a few things that I kind of wish it was a bit better at handling, namely just like word processing. It's kind of wimpy compared to even Word. But as far as just keeping everything in one nice packet, I mean, there are plenty of web-based things if you're a bit more into programming, but OneNote is it's simple, it's straightforward, and it works, and I can't ask for a whole lot more. Can't ask for a whole lot more than that. So I recommend it. I recommend it as a really good, at least as a good gateway for anyone trying to get into world building and organizing their own stuff. And then if you have more specific needs and can find a more specific tool for that, then you can expand from there. But OneNote is a really good starting point. At any rate, let's go ahead and figure out what's going on in the rest of these rooms here. So I just have, as usual, my little cheat sheet that has all of the things that I like to put in each room, so that way I can just exit off all of the stuff as it comes into play and becomes added there, so that way we don't get any repeats, just to make sure we get plenty of diverse, fun, interesting things going on. And we are going to start the rolling here. So this first room is going to have a medium difficulty battle in it. I'll make a little note about that. Medium battle. Fix that up there. Autocorrect would probably handle it for me, but I never trust autocorrect to handle things properly, because it rarely does. It rarely does. It's more like auto incorrect. Am I right? Classic. All right, and then there's just going to be some sort of monetary treasure reward going on in there. We'll put treasure. Hey, Gabby, how's it going? Good to see you. We'll put some treasure. I did kind of already say that I wanted this one to have. I want to put a trap there. I want this room to be trapped, because now that I'm thinking about it, that room is going to be where the door to the vaults is going to be, and I feel like it only makes sense for that door to have a trap that if our players approach it and try to handle it improperly, like if they don't have the keys they need and they try to use that door, there's going to be some serious consequences for that, because this is a very seriously guarded and protected pile of money that they're about to try and get their way into. Or presumably that's what it is. Will they find that in there? And so the reward, I'm actually going to put lore here, because the reward here, while there will probably be some sort of monetary gain for them getting through and into the vaults itself, or the vaults themselves. The vault, it's either the vault itself or plural, the vaults themselves. I need to pick one and stick with it. But while there is going to be some of that there, the real victory here is getting the key that they're after as well as I want to put a lot of like, I want to put in some way, shape, or form. I haven't decided how it's going to look yet, but I want to put a lot of answers about what happened to the Dwarven society throughout the unhinging that kind of caused them to have to flee the city rather than just try to defend it. I'm not sure how that's going to look, but that's what I want to do. Maybe there's just going to be some records that were put in there by someone who fled the city towards the vaults to try and seal them up or something. I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet. We'll get there. All one step at a time. But that's the kind of reward that I want to have in there for them. I'm going to mark that off on my little cheat sheet there. Alright, so let's go ahead and just move on to our next room here. The danger in that one is going to be just an easy battle. Let's see. Easy battle. Perfect. And then the reward is going to be... oh man, my players are going to be so mad about just the layout of that. So this is where they're going to get their compass, quote unquote. For any who have not heard me describe it before, I take a lot of the inspiration for how I organize my dungeons and parts of my campaigns from the way that classic Zelda dungeons are organized, including having the idea of maps and compasses be part of it. Like, I organize my games, there's almost kind of two phases of whenever I'm DMing. There's the dungeon crawl phase and then the roleplay phase. So when players are in like a dungeon, it's a lot more game mechanic-y, right? Where there's like defined rooms, monsters are not super commonly going to move from room to room. I like to make that more of a classic dungeon crawl, and so players can kind of have fun strategizing against specific sets of enemies and stuff like that. If there's something like egregious, like they're running from room to room, obviously then monsters will chase after them and stuff. But I do that, and then the role play is much more, it's self-descriptive there. It's the role playing. It's when they're not in dungeons, when they're in cities and stuff. It's much more freeform. We don't use maps and stuff like that, and I find that sort of satisfies every different type of gamer at the table. But within the dungeons, because I keep them more game mechanic-y, I like to use the compass and the map, so that way the map starts off like pitch black. Players have no idea where rooms are in relation to each other. They can't see hardly anything. If they find the map, then they understand that, they get to have the sort of like fog of war taken away so that they can see the layout of the dungeon at large. And then the compass is in some way, shape, or form an item that will help them know whether they have found anything that's worth finding within a room. And it kind of goes both ways. One, so that they don't miss anything, and two, so they don't end up wasting, a half hour of playtime on a room that is tapped out. Because I've definitely had players do that, where they'll just like sit there and they're convinced that I'm trying to trick them as the DM, and I'm like, no, I'm telling you, like, there's nothing there. Like, you guys, it's not poor rolls. There's nothing there, and they'll sit there and keep trying to explore things. I'm like, what? Why are you guys staring at this broom closet so much? So there are little tools that, like, if they decide to explore and be completionists about it, it can kind of turn into tools and assistance mechanisms for them to have an easier time getting through that. So it's very game mechanic-y. There's not a whole lot of like canon that explains it, but my players like it, and that's the important part. So we stick with it. So that's the reward there. And the reason I say they're going to be mad about the placement is they're ending up here, and they're beginning down here, which means they won't find the compass until like the end of it, so they might have to do some backtracking. But as the DM, I think that's hilarious, and it adds game time that I don't have to do any special preparation for, so there we go. Hooray, I win. As the DM, you have to find little victories wherever you can, because for the most part, it's an interesting thing for a DM, where you're kind of creating a game that you're supposed to lose. Like, you're creating a game with the intent that your players beat the game. And you being the computer in this scenario, like, the intent is that you don't succeed as the DM. Like whatever your creatures and characters' goals are, the idea in general is that they will not succeed in the name of your players succeeding. So when you can find little victories for yourself as a DM, you grab them and you hold them tight and you never let them go. Sorry. No, that's a little adversarial, but you know what I mean. Alright, so this room we're going to have, in some way, shape, or form, they're just going to find some potions. I like to scatter potions throughout the dungeons, because I do make my dungeons fairly intense and dungeon crawly, so there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen with not a lot of opportunities to just, like, up and leave without it having impacts on the story and the mission as a whole. You know, I like to try and, in some way, shape, or form, invoke a time constraint on players, so they have to prioritize and figure out and not abuse their ability to just like keep watch and take a long rest. So I do a lot of that stuff, but in exchange I give them potions and stuff for them to be able to get some buffs and boosts and recovery throughout the dungeon. So that's what's going on in room 4. Room 5, the danger is going to be another easy battle. Let's see here. Easy battle. Easy battles, the way I do them, are really not even about hurting the players. It's more about getting them to use up some of their basic resources. You know, start using a few spell slots. Start using up a few of like their health potions and stuff like that by just sort of whittling them down. It's an easy battle is never meant to be a challenge for the players. Always meant to just be a distraction and like I say, a resource management challenge for them. So we've got that, and then the reward in that room is going to be, this is where they're going to find their enchantment component. Enchantment, it's another homebrew mechanic of mine, where rather than just giving them magical items, I give them resources, and these things called enchantment tokens that are like imbued with a specific spell that's been kind of retooled to be an item enchantment as opposed to just a cast spell or like a spell scroll. So that way players can have the ability to like customize all of their fun weapons and armors and stuff with specific spells, and they can create like items for specific abilities and stuff like that. And it makes it more interesting rather than just handing them like, yeah, you get a +1 sword. It's like, okay, yeah, you got this spell that gives whatever you imbue with it, you know, some sort of fire-based thing. So if you put it on your sword will also like, when you draw it, it'll glow like a lightsaber and do fire damage, you know, to them and stuff like that. And it just makes it more fun and interesting. And I haven't gotten any complaints from my players yet, so I keep doing it. And it's fun for me too, because I love coming up with different enchantment types of spells and stuff just to make these cool legendary magical items. It's really fun. Alright, and then room 6 there is going to have a medium difficulty battle in it. Medium battle. Great. And then the reward will be some treasure. They'll just get some more money. That's our other treasure room. Which is like, I do recognize that there's a certain amusement to be had in the fact that they're heading their way towards basically the world's biggest bank vault. And the primary loot there is not going to be the money. And the rooms that do have money as their primary loot are other rooms. I'm the humor of that is definitely not lost on me. And in fact, I'm kind of reveling in it right now. Because one of the best things you can do as a writer, and I'm saying this with all the sarcasm I can muster, is subvert expectations so much that the expectation becomes subversion. Because then no one knows where you're coming from, not even you. Alright, this one's going to have an easy battle in it. And then the reward in that room will be, we're going to have that room be our empty room. So, along with always, with plenty of dangers and rewards, I also make sure to occasionally, I make sure to scatter around a room that has no danger just to panic them, because they will be like, what, we're not going to die in here? That doesn't make any sense, because they always die. But no, there'll be the chance for them to not have any danger, and then there's always a room that doesn't have a reward. And that's always the room where the compass kind of comes into play, because every other room has some sort of treasure in it, and a lot of times I'll hide the treasure in some way, shape, or form. So the empty room is just there to screw with them and be like, well, did you just not roll well enough? Did you not try the right thing? Or is it actually empty? Which really means that I should stop making fun of my players for wanting to have abilities to know the answer to that. But that's here. If you haven't watched any of my streams before, you'll quickly realize that I have a strange relationship with my players where I adore them, but also am very adversarial towards them, and try to come up with every way that I can to destroy every trope that every player falls into. Alright, the reward in this room is going to be a little bit of lore, in some way, shape, or form. There's some sort of information about the world at large. I like to have that, like, world building be its own reward within my games, just because I find that really helps with immersion for players, and it really helps them feel attached to the world they're in, the setting they're in, and the missions they're on. Okay, so then this, the next one is going to have a difficult battle in it. That'll be a fun one too. That's because that'll be really early on, so that'll warm them up real nice. So hard battle McCormick going on in there, and then the reward will be. The reward will be more potions. So, you know, the thing will almost kill it, but then it'll drop some potions and they'll heal. So, you know, just gotta persevere. And then by default, because we only have 10 things, that means that this room is going to have a puzzle in it, which I'm actually thinking, if I'm remembering my rooms, yeah, since that's where the entrance is, I think that's perfect. So there'll be a puzzle to get into this next segment, right? They'll finish up stage. Oops. They'll finish up stage 3 here. They'll find the secret door there, and then there'll be another puzzle for them to make it into the next segment there. So I actually think that'll be a lot of fun. I think that'll be perfect. So puzzle, and then by default that means our reward is going to be. Oh, they'll be really happy about that. They have they can find the map to this segment of the dungeon. Or the campaign within it. So that'll be really nice for them. Maybe we can just make it a particularly difficult puzzle so that it's not too much of a handout for them, but we can have we can probably have the map be hidden behind whatever that puzzle is. And I think that'll work out quite nicely. Alright, dice are away. We are all done with the dice for the moment. Alright. Hey, Benny Ho. Glad it's giving you inspiration, and also glad to hear that you've got an awesome session coming up on Sunday. I'm just glad to hear it all, man. I'm glad to hear it all. I'm happy to be your background noise, cause like I find that to be quite the compliment, because for me that's how I use most other streamers and like YouTubers, is as background noise to sort of be the occasional distraction / inspiration while I'm working. So I'm glad to join those ranks, and I'm glad to be that for you. Glad you are here and having a good time. Nice. Wow, you guys got all the sessions going on. See, my next session is until Monday. My next session is until Monday, and I'm not actually running this game because every once in a while my players will stop in and watch my streams, and I don't want them to accidentally spoil their own adventure for themselves. But that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear all of you guys have, like, you know, effective campaigns going now, because I feel like I hear a lot of people who are struggling to find a good group. And I feel like that's been a really common thing for a lot of players and wishful, hopeful players the past like 2 years. What with all of the pandemic chaos making it quite difficult to find good groups, kind of forces people to find groups online, and that can be such a hit or miss thing. So it makes my heart warm to know that people are still able to find groups and play regularly. That is such good news. Alright, so that is all away. Let's see here. Hey, I appreciate the follow. Glad to have you here. Glad to have you part of the crew. You should check out also, if you guys are really liking the discussion and sort of like the idea of sharing different homebrew ideas, you should check out, you can find on my About page, I've got my Discord server up there, and we got a lot of different channels for sharing like homebrew ideas and stuff. So if you guys want even more conversation about that, you can check that out. No pressure, no obligation, but that is a resource that I am working on building for all of us, because it is never a bad thing for DMs to be sharing and exchanging ideas. The more good DMs we have in the world, the better, because that just makes more games for all of us to play, and it gives all of us existing DMs more opportunities to take a break and be players. As if you're a DM, I'm sure you know quite well the struggles of the forever DM. Word gets around, and everyone in your your friends and family groups and all of them know that you're a DM and know that you play, and they're like, "Oh, can you teach me?" So you're constantly running games, and you never have the opportunity to to play yourself. So and there's an important omission in that: play yourself, not play with yourself, which is another activity that you can do, but not one that we're going to discuss here. That's a different website, and you guys have to pay me a lot more than I currently get paid if I'm going to ever discuss that in any more depth. And now that I've forcefully shoved in an off-color joke, let's continue with our campaign rating. So we're going to do a medium battle. Let's go back and take a look at kind of what we've organized here. I've already kind of thrown together the fundamental components of what this dungeon is going to look like and what it's going to include. It's one of the first things that I always do when I'm doing, like I say, I kind of think about it as more as chapters. So at the beginning of each chapter, I kind of decide on what the overall theme and atmosphere is going to be. So this one's very much been Dwarven Underground, this component of it. But then for each segment, so I break down the chapters into as many segments as the player level it's intended for. So this chapter is our level 5 chapter, so there are 5 components in it. And so for each segment, I sort of I at the very beginning think about, okay, what enemies specifically are going to be in each segment, and I find doing it all kind of together like that helps me thematically keep things similar, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to start working on this one part here, and I spend, a couple weeks working on one part, and then by the time I get to the next part, like, I've strayed so much from section to section to section that I kind of forgot what the initial intent was at the outset. So I pre-organize all that, as I've done with this one. And that includes also planning the difficulty, because I like, as players progress through a given chapter, I like to ramp up the difficulty a little bit. So it's like, it'll start off pretty easy for level 5 players, and that's so that way they can enjoy all their new level 5 stuff that they've just gotten, and like enjoy the fact that they're progressing and getting better at adventuring, and give them that sense of accomplishment, right? Because it kind of defeats the point of leveling up if leveling up never gives you the opportunity to be stronger. If all of the enemies immediately catch up to you, it can almost be a little disheartening. So I like to kind of ramp up the difficulty. So we've already kind of planned out at this stage how difficult different battles are going to be, and I always do that based on a very complicated mathematical system I use using experience points. It kind of ends up relating similarly to the challenge rating, and one of these days I'll make a video relating it. And I don't think I'm actually breaking any new ground or anything like that. I think I'm just overanalyzing it and showing my work as I use the systems, because I largely just use what's already in place via the rules as written, with like the challenge rating and the experience points. Like I say, I'm just like, it's like I'm that guy who did proofs in middle school geometry and like was foolish enough to actually find ways to use it in life rather than omit it because I'm not a mathematician, so there's really no point in me knowing it. I'm the guy who stuck with it for like genuinely no discernible reason other than to be a nerd. So I suppose that's reason enough. I'm a nerd. It makes me happy to be one. So maybe that right there was the reason. At any rate, At any rate, so we've got a lot of this stuff kind of figured out. Our skill checks for this one are I'm going to stick with our 11, 12, and 14 motif here. For level 5 players, that's going to be a little bit on the easy side. But that's okay for two reasons. One, there's nothing saying that I can't make it more difficult if I need to. And two, skill checks are more about... I find they're more about... it's not about trying to hide things and stop players from getting things. It's more about, like, incorporating into a game a stopping point for them to have to stop and think about what they're doing and make a decision about what they're doing, right? So it's like I don't ever particularly care how difficult a stealth check is to sneak up behind an enemy or something. Like I don't care whether they succeed or not. Like there's nothing to be gained or lost from doing it. The more important thing is to get your players to stop and be in the moment and think about, oh, there's enemies there. We could have someone try and sneak up. We could just attack them outright. We could try and trick them or trap them or something. Presenting these points that require a skill check of any kind is more about giving players pause to think about what they're doing. And that, one, adds length to the game, that's not even just trying to cover my tracks for not creating enough stuff. It's like you don't want... Like, a game isn't fun if you go through it too fast, right? Just like it's not fun to watch a movie on fast forward, right? It's you want to stop it and soak in the scenes as needed and all that kind of stuff. So that's one that's kind of the big reason that I don't really care, right? That's what I want them to do, is to think about what their strengths are and sort of strategize. And the other thing that's really nice about incorporating those pause points in there too is it gives the opportunity for discussion to flow, which can be really helpful if you have a variety of personalities at your table. And what I mean is, if there's just a constant like go nature to the game, you're gonna end up with one or two people that kind of take charge and are the ones doing things. If you put in a diverse amount of stuff to do that requires these pause points to think about, oh, we'll probably need a skill check of some point, even if it's really easy to pass, by putting that stop in there, it gives players the chance to stop and check in with each other. It gives you, the DM, a natural pause in the action so that you can check in with all the players. And so if there's a quieter player at the table, it gives them a built-in opportunity to speak up with their abilities, right? So if there's this tendency that the barbarian is always like, I kick down the door, I kick down the door, I kick down the door, throw in a really tough door that requires a skill check, to get in, a door that's locked. It doesn't even matter if it would be particularly easy. It can be a really easy door, a really flimsy door even. But if there's like a locked door, then it's like, oh, do we pick the lock or do we kick it down? And that gives, the player that's a more uncomfortable at speaking up type of person the opportunity to recognize, like, oh wait, this is my opportunity to do stuff, and it gives you, the DM, the chance to kind of pull them in there. So that's a really long, rambling explanation for it, but I know some people will look at these and think like a 14 at level 5. There's people that'll be like, they would have to roll a 7 or below at that point to fail at some of their checks, and that's very true. But like I say, it's not about trying to block players away from stuff. If there is, I can always make it more difficult if I need to. But it's the mechanism is more about putting in opportunities for different people to try different things within a game. And the other thing too is I want my players to succeed at what they try to do. I want them to feel that success. I want it to feel like a challenge while they're doing it, which having to roll will do that. Right? The fact that there's a chance that they could fail at all will make it feel like a challenge, and it'll make them feel like they've succeeded at something when they overcome it. So it doesn't really matter how easy it is. I mean, if you set it to a 6, and so they roll a 7 and they're succeeding at everything, they're gonna be like, why are we rolling? So there has to be some reasonable chance of failing. But anyway, I should stop rambling about that. I'm really belaboring the point. Really belaboring it there, which is just not necessary. But that's what we're working with there. we've already figured out how difficult the battles are going to be. Easy battles, only 900 experience points. That's like 3. I mean, like, look at that here. That's like 4 challenge rating 1 enemies for, and these are all balanced to 5 players, so 5 level 5 players. That's still going to be really easy. But like I say, that's fine, because the easy battles are more about getting them to use up some of their resources in between long rests. Medium battles are more about, like that's kind of what the easy battles are set to. Medium battles are meant to be like an easy challenge. The hard battles are meant to be like, okay, we're sweating a bit, there's some tough stuff here, and then the boss battle is a boss. Like, that's meant to feel pretty perilous. And so that's kind of how I organize all of this stuff. So we've got all that figured out, and we have also figured out oh wait, you know what? I just realized I put all this stuff in the wrong section. That was the last section. I was about to get confused. I was like, why did I put apes in the bottom here? That's okay. We can easily fix this. We're going to copy and move this up here, because that's all supposed to go in this section. So we'll go paste all that there, and then we'll just paste our blank one down. That's why. Copy that. Delete it. And go down here. And then boom, there we go. Okay, so we're in this section here, so the numbers are going to be a little bit different for the dangers and everything like that, but that's it. All the principles are still the same. So we figured this stuff out here, and you can see I've already sort of pre-planned out what monsters are going to be present in each of these sections here. And so this one, we've got Steeders, Kruthiks, spiders, and the Kruthik Hivelord. So there's going to be, so in this one we're really leaning into like the monstrous spider types of creatures, and the players up until this point have encountered a lot of those, and this kind of plays into, again, why I like to spend a lot of time early on sort of pre-planning all this stuff. One of the things that I really like doing with my dungeons is having similarly themed monsters show up throughout the entire chapter, and that gives players the opportunity to sort of learn what types of monsters they're facing and sort of get better at handling those types of monsters as they go. So by keeping some of those spiders, there's some familiarity, even though they're going to face the Kruthik. And then I kind of throw all that out the window when we get to this part here, because we've completely thrown them out of the underground. But basic principle is that's what's going on. So we know we've got our monsters and stuff all figured out. So now it's just a matter of putting in details for all of our rooms and stuff, and so that'll be good. But before I get started on all that, I'm going to take just like a minute to myself. I got to run to the bathroom. I'm going to refill my beverage, and then when I get back, we will dive into starting to detail out some of these rooms. So I appreciate your patience ahead of time. Stick with me. I won't be gone long, I promise. It'll just be a few seconds. But I don't imagine most people want to watch me pee my pants on stream. That would just be uncomfortable for everyone involved. Or at least I hope it would be. I would hope that you guys would be uncomfortable at my discomfort, but I don't know. I guess some people are into that, but I think I'm overanalyzing it. I'm going to run to the bathroom, and I'll be right back. So sit tight. I appreciate your patience. I'm not even going to change the screen. I'm just going to leave it right here for you. So, all right, sit tight. All right. Again, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it, as does my bladder. It's, biology can't be helped for the most part. Not this aspect of it anyway. When nature comes knocking, you can either answer the door or wait for her to bust down the door, but one way or another, that train's a rolling. So, at any rate, let's go ahead and start talking details for a lot of these rooms. Hold on. Collar's all folded on itself, and it's making me uncomfortable. And everyone knows that the most important thing is for me to be comfortable. I think it's just gonna bunch up. That's what I get for not having a real mic and having to use my headset like this. It's my own fault for being poor. All right, let's go ahead and describe for ourselves, for our players, a medium battle here. So, medium battles on this floor are going to be worth 800 experience points. So that's four of our easiest, our fodder-based enemies, these steeders, and then phase spiders are there as well. The steeders, I mean, I'm honestly just going to kind of skin them as being a type of spider. They kind of are. They function pretty similarly, and they look pretty similar, so if players look it up, they kind of work well enough. So they're kind of surrogate spiders because there's only so many things within the monster manuals and all that stuff that you can use to fit a specific theme. It's not like they've made a big book of spiders. That would be kind of a cool supplement, though, like the big book of spiders. Do that for like all of them, or like you could do like the little book. You could do like a series. It's like the little book of what's it, and like you do one for spiders. You could do one for everything, for all this like similar types of creatures, and then you have one that's the big book of creatures or something like that. I don't know. I should stop pitching and just actually work on my own stuff here, shouldn't I? But then again, I am working on homebrew stuff, so that's kind of like everything that I work on is me pitching. I don't know. I'm getting too meta with this. Let's go ahead and just say that this one's going to be worth 800 experience points, and let's just keep it simple for this first one that we're going to make. And we're just going to have them face 4 of our female female like mail, like in the mail, the U.S. Post Office. No, female steeder. And then I always like to make a little note about what they are worth experience point wise individually, so that way if there's ever a reason that players don't kill off all of them, I can have an easier time mathing out the breakdown of how much they did kill and what experience points they get. I like to run my games with experience points. I know that there is a forever ongoing debate about landmark versus experience point leveling up. And the only thing I can really say about it is every game is going to be a little different, and you should do what feels best and most enjoyable to you and your players. I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do it. The way I structure my games, and because I organize the challenges so closely to the experience points given, that's how I like to organize it. That said, I also will oftentimes give out experience points when very important roleplay landmarks and whatnot have been achieved. So that way, more than anything, that way I can make sure that players don't fall too far behind if they're not seeking out every fight. A lot of the other thing that I'll do is I count avoiding a fight the same as overcoming it, so they don't necessarily have to kill a monster to get the experience points. Basically, as long as they as long as they succeed at whatever they wanted to do to or around that monster, they get the points for it, is what I like to do. But anyway, digression complete. So we're going to throw some steeders at him there within this room. So that's in this little chamber here. I want to just get in my mind here an image of what the steeders look like again, and make sure I'm thinking of all of these guys properly. It doesn't even give a picture, does it? Wonderful. These guys have one. Yeah, these guys. Okay, yeah. So they're almost more like tick-like things, but like Duragar, like tick spider things. Is what they kind of look like. Look at that thing's gross. thing is really gross. It looks like an engorged tick. Ugh. Sucking the blood of giants or something. Yuckers. Yuckers. Okay, so yeah, that just oh man, Durgar Cavalrachni. That's such a cool word, Cavalrachni. Get a picture of that? Nah. That would have been a cool one. Cedars don't spin webs, but they exude a sticky... Oh, here we go. This could be helpful. Durgar breed and train these giant underdark-dwelling tarantulas. That does not look like a tarantula in that picture, but I digress. It's a fantasy world. A tarantula can be whatever we want it to be. Male steeders are as big as ponies and used by the Durgar as beasts of burden. The larger females are trained and used as mounts. So they can do wall walk and stuff and snare prey, but they don't do it with webs. Perfect. So see, and that's kind of the helpful stuff. It's a fantasy homebrew world, so we can play pretty fast and loose with how we use monsters. So if I wanted them to spin webs, then I could. But I like to, for monsters especially, kind of stick as close to it as possible. So that way, if I ever go about distributing this stuff and I have to kind of parse it down to take out my own personal homebrew world stuff to make it, you know, so that I don't get in legal trouble for disseminating it under the, like, what do they call it, the DM guild or whatever, rules and stuff. That way I can still have it be realistic enough to stuff as written that I don't have to completely rewrite everything, and I can just say, like, yeah, they're steeders and this is how they move around. So let's see here. So here's what I want to do with this one. I'm going to put a DM note here, and always DM note in a different color. Always a different color. So that way when you're reading your own notes, you see the different color. And remember, don't read this out loud, dummy, otherwise you'll give everything away to the players. And I say that from experience because I've absolutely done that kind of stuff more times than I wish were true. And I get so mad at myself. Like, my players are always so kind about it. They're always like, oh, it's okay, we won't use that meta knowledge. I'm like, for the sake of the game, I appreciate that, but I really wanted that to be like a jaw-dropping M. Night Shyamalan ding dong for you guys as players too. But so I've taken to notes about mechanics and about where things are hidden are always in a different color, and you do not read the different color out loud until you very intentionally mean to give away that info. So I'm going to say no stealth option as the creatures are on the ceiling. DC, I'm going to say DC 12. And here's another thing that I always do. So kind of going on that conversation about having difficulty checks and all that kind of stuff be an opportunity to give players pause so they can think about the creative ways to proceed with whatever they're working on. Kind of along the lines of that conversation, I rarely define what they need to roll within my notes. I rarely will say players have to do this kind of check here. Instead, I will just say a check needs to be done here. This is the difficulty of that check. And the reason I do that is because if I predetermine what needs to be done, even if I'm the one writing it, there's a tendency for a DM to become very inflexible with things. And that can have two results that ultimately lead to one result. One of them is that it can result in players not figuring out what needs to be done because you're just not able to describe it clear enough that they need to be making an athletics check here or something like that. And the other thing that will happen is players will then try to repeat the same action over and over again until they succeed for a change. And both of those can lead to a frustrating gaming experience. So what I prefer to do is just say, okay, the DC needs to be this, and don't define what it is, and instead have players just say, I would like to try this to overcome this obstacle, and I'll say, okay, great, make that roll, and then that DC is automatically set to 12. And so that just encourages players to be creative, and it encourages me as a DM to accept the yes and approach to things, as opposed to roadblocking them until they can guess the right check that I'm looking for. So you will rarely, sometimes there needs to be something very specific, right? And most of the time I do have a specific check in mind when I write out a DC, but you'll rarely see me actually say DC 12 sleight of hand or DC 12 medicine. Like, I'll rarely do that, and I'll just instead say, this is how difficult whatever they try to do should be. Let them be creative in how they try to overcome that obstacle. So, you know, good. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, I think that's has turned. It's made me a better DM as far as letting my players get creative and get wacky and do what they want to do. It's made me more flexible, and it's helped me be a better ad-libber. Despite all of this amount of preparation that I'm doing, that I always do for my games, it has made me a better DM to be like this and not come up with those specific things. It's made me much better at improving and accepting what my players want to do if I don't have something predetermined that I am expecting myself to do here. So, anyway, DC 12, I'm just going to say DC 12 to notice the Steeders on the ceiling. We'll do that. And I feel like that's kind of all we need. And the other thing that's nice about doing DC 12 too is if no one takes a look at it, I can then ask around what their passive perceptions are as one last ditch effort, and if no one is able to succeed at it, which at a 12 there should be at least a couple of them, right? Then the Steeders can get a flat out surprise attack. Whereas if they're just going to fail to notice them, you know, standard, then it's like,